Welcome back to the War Room. I'm your host, Rob Dew. Roger Stone will be up next segment. But first, two of the biggest snowflake triggerers probably in the world, Roger Stone and Alex Jones, on Tuesday went to a gun range here, the range here in Austin, which is a very high-end, great range. I'll tell you what, I went in there to shoot video. I was running behind, actually. And there's a guy sitting, I think his name was Levi, and he jumps up. He goes, "I got to shake your hand. Thank you, Mr. Dew, for what you're doing." Knew who I was, everything. And I'm blown away at the reach that these shows have here at the Central Texas Command Center, even in liberal Mecca of Austin. So without further ado, let's watch the video that had the liberals triggered. Welcome back to the War Room. I'm your host, Rob Dew. Roger Stone will be up next segment. But first, two of the biggest snowflake triggerers probably in the world, Roger Stone and Alex Jones, on Tuesday went to a gun range here, the range here in Austin, which is a very high-end, great range. I'll tell you what, I went in there to shoot video. I was running behind, actually. And there's a guy sitting, I think his name was Levi, and he jumps up. He goes, "I got to shake your hand. Thank you, Mr. Dew, for what you're doing." Knew who I was, everything. And I'm blown away at the reach that these shows have here at the Central Texas Command Center, even in liberal Mecca of Austin. So without further ado, let's watch the video that had the liberals triggered.
You can't have a right if it's not being exercised.
I don't shoot you good.
That's amazing.
I think this video is going to trigger libtards.
So this is a Glock 18C machine pistol. This fire.
Yeah.
That's the one.
That's amazingly cool.
This is the best range I've ever been to. They got the big thing downstairs. They got this VIP area. It's a little bit more, and it's usually really busy downstairs. Not up here, but I mean, come on the weekends, it's real busy. But during the weekday, take off your family.
Come and shoot it. That's what we said. Come and shoot it.
Yeah, instead of come and take it, come and shoot it.
From Media Matters is Alex Jones and Roger Stone visit gun range to prepare for civil war if Trump is removed from office. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones and Roger Stone, a conservative pundit who has advised President Trump for decades, visit a shooting range to fire weapons in preparation for a civil war in the event Trump is removed from office. So it was an hour and a half long. We put it out there. We did a live stream. And when asked to spell out his comments to TNC, Stone, who is a contributor to Jones's INFOWARS, said, "We do not advocate violence or foment violence. But if there is a coup d'etat, and if there is an illegitimate, unconstitutional effort to remove Donald Trump on trumped-up charges by biased partisan prosecutors or an illegitimate takedown by the 25th Amendment, there will be a civil war in this country. The Trump constituency has been awakened, and they will not be put to sleep." He was there at the shooting range to practice self-defense for himself and his family, but also to defend the Constitution if necessary. So obviously, that has triggered leftists and liberals alike. We have it here at Infowars.com. Here's the video. This video triggers Trump haters. Share it now. We got the short 8-minute version, and then you can watch the long hour 22-minute version. Now, coming up next, the man himself, Roger Stone, sharpshooter McGraw, will be joining me not in studio, but be joining me via Skype. Stay tuned. You're watching The War Room at Infowars.com/show.
Welcome back. You're at Freedom Command Central, and I'm your co-host, Roger Stone, joined today by my colleague, Rob Dew. I don't think I've had that much fun in a long time. I have a healthy respect for the Second Amendment and proper use of firearms. And frankly, I grow exceedingly tired of the threats against my family, my wife, children, my grandchildren, even my dogs. I don't know what it is with these left-wing conspiracy theorists. They see Putin behind every tree, under every bush, behind every corner. In fact, we've gotten to the point, if you get a parking ticket, well, it means Putin must have controlled the meter maid. But while we do not advocate violence, nor do we foment violence, we do believe in self-defense. Antifa are the folks who advocate violence. In fact, they wear masks. We don't. We're proud of who we are and what we believe in. So, Rob, it was an extraordinary experience at the range, and I came away with a lot of knowledge that I didn't have before about the proper use of these sophisticated weapons.
It is amazing the power that you're wielding when you're holding a gun, and the difference between a semi-auto and a fully auto. You know, the press likes to talk about automatic weapons all the time. You're not allowed to have automatic weapons unless you got them before. I think it was like 86. They put a gun ban out. I'm probably wrong on that, and there's probably gun people probably flipping in their chairs. But there was a gun ban that came out in the 80s for automatic weapons, like what we're firing there, that Uzi, isn't that a fun gun to fire?
It was really quite extraordinary, and I found it surprisingly light compared to the other machine-type weapon, the one that was on the tripod. It's an extraordinary experience. You have to respect the proper use of these weapons. But I want to reiterate again for all the libtards out there whose heads are exploding even as we speak. No, we're not advocating revolution, but if you bring it and we have to defend ourselves and our families and our Constitution, we will. I do not think that the elites in this country who so despise Donald Trump and the wave of reform that he's bringing to the country recognize the intensity of support for this president in middle America, in flyover country, and now in the wake of this historic tax cut, the president is even stronger.
I totally agree. I just saw this. John Brennan tweeted this. Trump administration threat to retaliate against nations that exercise sovereign right in UN, so now the UN's a sovereign country, to oppose U.S. position on Jerusalem is beyond outrageous. And this is a guy who's a Muslim. Shows at Real Donald Trump expects blind loyalty and subservience from everyone. Now, isn't it funny that Donald Trump tweeted out a video showing Bill Clinton, George Bush, Barack Obama, all saying they were going to make Jerusalem the capital of Israel, and they were going to move the embassy there. All of them talked about it. They talked a great game, but when it came time to actually do it, they backed off. Trump said it, and then he did it, which I think really pisses people off that you actually have a president who's keeping his promises. Whatever side of the fence you're on the Israel debate, I think they have the right to exist and defend themselves from attackers. But he actually did what he said he was going to do.
John Brennan, in my opinion, is the absolute worst of the deep state criminals. In my book, The Making of the President 2016, which you can get at the INFOWARS store for Christmas, I outline how, as the CIA station chief in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh, he converted to the most radical brand of Islam. He is fluent in the language. He has been an equal opportunity hitman for both Republicans and Democrats. One wonders how someone with his pedigree could be confirmed for such a position. It's very interesting if you go back and look. He was predicting Russian collusion long before anyone else. How could that be? Yet he at one point told the president of the United States, at that point I think he was president-elect, you watch your mouth. Because the president...
Actually, he has a soy boy voice. It was, you watch your mouth. It's a very soft-spoken man for someone with so much power in killing people.
Yeah, no, interesting observation. Look, Brennan is the worst of the worst, and quite clearly, he's well aware of the fact that according to the FISA court, he was in on the effort to illegally surveil 30,000 Americans for political purposes, essentially political espionage manifested in an effort by our intelligence services in using the state apparatus to spy on Republicans and the Republican nominee for president. Mr. Brennan has therefore committed egregious crimes, far worse than the crimes we saw in Watergate. he needs to be prosecuted. And if we ever got an attorney general who was committed to the rule of law instead of this fellow we have now who appears, based on everything I can see, to be asleep, perhaps Mr. Brennan would get his just desserts. Brennan is one of those who filed an amicus brief in the phony lawsuit against me by Protect Democracy, an Obama-blessed front. Now, their amicus brief is, of course, pointless. It just reiterates the bogus charge that the Russians penetrated our elections, interfered in our elections, which, of course, is beside the point in this lawsuit, because there is no evidence whatsoever that I ever had any commerce or contact or activity involving the Russians. So it's rather extraneous, to say the least. I look forward to my day in court there. In the meantime, my legal bills for fighting Brennan and the deep state and all the others who have come into this lawsuit against the president and I is hit $485,000. So if you're interested in sending a Christmas present to the Stone family, go to stonedefensefund.com, where my friends have set up a legal defense fund. As you know, we were able to win the defamation suit against me in New York that was essentially underwritten by George Soros. And we will overcome this bogus, frivolous harassment lawsuit, which alleges that Donald Trump and I worked with the Russians to hack the DNC and give the material to WikiLeaks. False.
Meanwhile, Roger, while they're running around talking about Russians and all this other stuff that doesn't exist, Trump's signing tax bills. He's putting embassies in Jerusalem. He is giving the power back to the people to do with their own money. I think this tax bill is probably the biggest thing he's going to do, obviously this year and probably into next, unless he gets some big infrastructure bill going to put more Americans to work. But going back to Jeff Sessions before we go to break, it looks like he is going to start an investigation into Uranium One, and he's also looking into the Bundy situation and what happened there, because they all just got, it was thrown out. The evidence was, the government was hiding evidence against the defense and against the judge. So they threw that whole lawsuit out. So now we have two things that it looks like Jeff Sessions might start doing something out of. Maybe that'll keep his mind off of going after pot dealers.
Well, my understanding is that he has submitted a memo to the White House policy shop saying that he is prepared to repeal the Cole memo. That's the memo that was written under Barack Obama. One of the few things that Eric Holder did at DOJ that I heartily agree with, which essentially has the federal government stand down in those instances where the states, through their own process, have legalized mostly medicinal marijuana. I fear that Jeff Sessions, now seeing the president on a historic high in terms of his power and his influence in the wake of a very successful tax cut, will move ahead on cracking down on state legalized cannabis. This is in violation of what Donald Trump promised the American people. It's in violation of what he has told me directly is his position. He is not himself a user or a proponent of cannabis, quite obviously, but he believes the people should decide. He believes it should be left to the states. And as he said in the campaign, if I may quote directly, medicinal, I'm 1,000% in support of medicinal.
All right, we'll be right back. Roger, thanks for watching.
Welcome back to the War Room. I'm your co-host, Roger Stone, with Rob Dew sitting in for Owen Schroyer. Earlier today, I taped C-SPAN's Newsmakers program, which will air Sunday morning. That discussion, mostly about the extensive piece that I wrote for INFOWARS outlining the etymology, that's the history, of Uranium One. Now, what we have going on here, Rob, is a briar patch strategy by the Democrats. They seek to goad the president into firing Mueller to try to regain the upper hand. The allegation, of course, would be that, Trump is firing Mueller to cover up his own crimes. And the president should not take the bait, in my opinion. We know that General Flynn has said that he was directed by a senior member of the presidential transition team to reach out to the Russian ambassador. We presume that that was most likely the president's son-in-law and counselor, Jared Kushner. We know that Mr. Kushner has been questioned for hours by the Senate, the House, the FBI, most likely in a continued effort to try to catch him in some kind of perjury trap. I suspect that Mueller will attempt to move on Jared Kushner, who has, again, some arcane process-related crime, which is essentially entrapment. But this is designed to enrage and perhaps provoke the president to fire Mueller. So the president needs to remain cool. He needs to remain calm, but he needs to recognize that the strategy of his lawyers, a strategy of rolling over, is not going to work, and that he must immediately order Jeff Sessions to appoint a special prosecutor in the matter of Uranium One. This would have the effect essentially of checkmating Mueller and his inquiry, because a Uranium One inquiry under the aegis of an honest prosecutor would be focused on Mr. Mueller, Mr. Comey, Mr. McCabe, and yes, Mr. Rosenstein. They cannot continue to pursue the president like a pack of rabid dogs if they themselves are under federal investigation. So I have laid it out, and the president must put wax in his ears and ignore these efforts to provoke him into an impulsive action to fire Mueller, as much as Mr. Mueller deserves to be fired.
I would totally agree. And it's good to see that the Republicans, like Devin Nunes, when he backed away from the Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, people thought, oh, he's back, he's fallen down, he's fallen on the sword, he's a wimp. He was actually going behind the scenes with other lawmakers and saying, we're going to look at what these guys are doing from behind the scenes to see if we can actually do something. Because this Trump-Russia thing is total nonsense. It's a nothing burger. He knew it back then. Probably reading INFOWARS, who knows. But to go around the end and start working with other lawmakers who are just concerned with basic decency, that's all, trying to figure out what's really going on with the Democrats. And I think their hand is going to be 2018. We're going to see probably the fall of the major leadership of the Democratic Party.
Well, you know, Alex Jones has been really consistent about this from the beginning. The irony of the whole situation is, in Uranium One, we learned that they are the ones who are colluding with the Russians. They were the ones making millions of dollars from the associates of Putin. The irony of them turning around and baselessly accusing the president of being in bed with Putin when it's Bill and Hillary Clinton who pulled in $145 million in contributions and a cool $500,000 in a speaking fee. So there is a supreme irony here that they're accusing Trump of exactly what they have done. And it is, of course, treasonous when you sell 20% of a strategic material to a foreign power. They knew precisely what they were doing.
Yeah, they did. And, you know, I hope and pray that we're going to finally see some justice, because it seems like everybody on the outside can really see what's going on. And it's like these dense heads up in Washington are just like, well, we have this Russian collusion, and that's all they're, it's like they have been programmed Borg robots to do nothing but go after Trump on this. Now, I do have some breaking news here from the Las Vegas shooting. We were talking about that earlier, how the FBI is going to release their report in 1 year. The medical examiner, and this is from Laura Loomer, released the list of Las Vegas shooting fatalities, but there's one not there. There's one shooting fatality that wasn't listed, and that is Stephen Paddock, the proposed gunman. You come down here to the piece, and he's not listed. Why would they not put his name on here as someone, even if it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound, a suicide, which is what we're told he did, but it looks like he was also shot in the chest. Why aren't they listing that? What do you think is the deal, Roger?
Well, you know, I'm not an expert on what happened in Las Vegas. I do think that Tucker Carlson has been most excellent on this point, which is to say, we're not making allegations, we're not making assertions, we're not reaching conclusions. We'd like to know why we're being told nothing, why there is no information. That leads one reasonably to believe that something untoward is being covered up. Beyond that, it's very hard to know. Now, firearms experts continue to tell me, based on acoustics and listening to recordings, they think it highly unlikely that these bump stock single-shot rifles were used, and it is far more likely that some kind of automatic weapon was at play. I'm not knowledgeable enough to know, but I am knowledgeable enough to know we're not being told the truth about what has transpired here.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a canard, as you like to say. Now, I want to get to this. I don't know if we have time before we go to the break, but we got this Mikhail Thalen article. One of your favorite people in the world, Cenk Uygur. I don't know if I said his name right, but Young Turks Unger once called women genetically flawed for not sleeping with him, among other things. And he defends this by saying, oh, that's when he was a conservative. I don't ever really hear conservatives talking like this. I only really hear the liberals and the libtards talk like this about each other. And I had not yet matured. I was still a conservative. Progressive figure claims in response to the damning remarks. This is, I guess, Cassandra Anderson released the initial article on, I think it was Gateway Pundit. But he said things like, let's see, it seems there is like a sea of tits here, and I'm drinking tiny droplets. I want to dive into the whole GD ocean, is what he wrote. Obviously, the genes of women are flawed. They're poorly designed creatures who do not want to have sex as often as needed for the human race to get along peaceably and fruitfully. And this is a man who called you a liar on one of our streams back during the Republican National Convention. He kind of got in your face and freaked out when we showed him your rape shirt.
Yeah, no, he objected to my claims that former New York Governor Eliot Spitzer liked and abused prostitutes. I think I turned out to be correct about that. I didn't know that he was ever a conservative. Exactly when. Welcome back. You're at the War Room with your hosts, Roger Stone, and sitting in for Owen Schroyer today, Rob Dew. So, Rob, what else is on the news today? Being in preparation for my C-SPAN interview, which was taped around noon, and then catching some of the late-breaking news, particularly some of this Brennan stuff, I see that it was quite a day.
Well, it definitely was. I want to go back to this article because this is a guy who called you out as being a liar. And you have your Stones rules, right? Which is all about how to be a successful political operative. Cenk has rules of dating. Wait till you hear these. And he says, these are all in quotes, women ignore these at your peril. Rule 1, there must be some serious making out by the third date. This guy sounds like he's 12 years old. If I haven't felt your TITSs by then, things are not about to last much longer. In fact, if I don't get back on track by the fourth date, you're done. Or if you don't get back on track. You must be orgasm by fifth date. That sounds very cavemanish. Must be orgasm by fifth date. And he even talks about a Mardi Gras trip in which he felt countless breasts. I kissed over 23 women and saw countless breasts and was in a wonderful drunken stupor thanks to my friend John Daniels, which I think is a typo. It should be Jack Daniels. And so he said he's changed. He's done all this changing. Yet a former employee of the Young Turks who was speaking to the Rap said he still makes women feel uncomfortable. He's a knucklehead. He's a boy. He talks about women the way I talked when I was 13, said the former employee. He's obsessed with body count. Basically, how many people have you effed? This is an important number to him. I mean, does this sound like a person anyone should be taking seriously at this point?
It sounds to me like a case of arrested development. I mean, who would say things like that? Who would commit them to writing? Even worse. Plus, I have a feeling that Cenk may be headed to the worst dressed list, which I will release, as I always do, on New Year's Day.
Excellent. I can't wait to see that. I don't think I'll make it because I'm not much of a fashionista. I prefer to go out in the tactical vest with my hat pulled backwards.
Well, but you do have the hat favored by Che Guevara, favored by Sir Robert Montgomery, favored by yours truly, which we refer to as the Rob Do hat. So that's stylish in itself. Look, not everybody is into what I'm into in terms of being a fashion plate and caring about these things, but by and large, you don't have to dress expensively to be stylish. Style, unlike fashion, is not fleeting. Style is constant. The hat you wear, Rob, was in fashion in the 50s when Che Guevara wore it. It's stylish today. It will be stylish tomorrow. Cenk will never be considered stylish.
That is very, very true. I will tell you, in college, I used to do this thing. I wore plaid shorts with tie-dyed shirts. That was my thing, tie-dyes and plaid. Now, here's another story that is very interesting and sort of bolsters Trump's call for the wall. Bureau of Prisons, 1 in 5 inmates is foreign-born. That would be over 20%. A new report from Attorney General Jeff Sessions' DOJ says that 185,507 inmates currently in custody, 39,000 of those inmates, or about 21%, are foreign-born who entered the U.S. either illegally or legally. So that's nearly 40,000. Another 38% of the foreign-born inmate population remain under investigation by ICE. So that's a big number, especially for Democrats to try to wrap their heads around that, as Trump calls for tougher immigration laws, more ICE enforcement, stronger border with a wall. And now you have this information coming out. What do you say to this? 20% it looks like now, 1 in 5.
You know, what's amazing, Rob, is the way the president instinctively recognized the dangers of our current immigration system. This is the first presidential candidate that I have ever worked for, and I've been in 10 national presidential campaigns, starting with Richard Nixon all the way to Donald Trump, a little detour to support the Libertarian Party candidate in 2012, Governor Gary Johnson, good man. But generally speaking, at this level of politics, extensive polling and survey research is done to try to get a handle on what the people are thinking. What's amazing is how instinctual Donald Trump, a non-politician, is. He identified the immigration issue as a sleeper issue of last year. We would not even been discussing sanctuary cities in 2016, but for Donald Trump and the Trump campaign. We would not be discussing the wall if it were for Donald Trump using it as a rhetorical advice to tell people that if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. Just a perfect example of how he is a natural, that how he is not only a quick study, he adapted to politics, I'd say pretty well, but he's an instinctive political leader. He's not sticking a wet finger in the wind. He's not trying to figure out what to say in order to be popular. He's just telling you what he really thinks. He speaks from the gut. He speaks from the heart. Occasionally he makes a mistake, but frankly, people see that as genuine because humans make mistakes. When you don't make any mistakes, that means you're a pre-programmed, robot. Not a single word Hillary Clinton ever said in last year's campaign wasn't tested, focus grouped, roundtabled, massaged. There was nothing authentic or genuine about any of it, but that means that somebody actually thought in advance about calling us deplorables, one of the greatest errors of last year. Now would be a good time, I think, to remind folks that if you're enjoying the War Room, if you like our expanded program, if you are down with the forces of freedom, we urge you to do your Christmas shopping at the INFOWARS store. Right now, we have our Christmas sale in full swing, and you will find deep discounts on the most popular products that Alex Jones puts on the market. What I like is the way INFOWARS and the scientists and chemists and others that Alex Jones works with fuse the best of the old with the new. you get some of the most reputable century-old Chinese herbs combined with some of these cutting-edge natural supplements to produce new products that are just off the charts. Alpha Power, now on sale, is a perfect example of such a formula for increased physical performance, increased athletic performance, sense of well-being. This is a terrific product, and right now you have a 50% off sale. So whether it's Alpha Power, whether it's my favorite Brain Force Plus, whether it's Caveman and Mike Zimmerman's favorite, the bone broth there, go to the store now, do your Christmas shopping, whether it's the T-shirts, the books, the supplements, and you know that you're going to be supporting the forces of freedom. You're going to be helping us pay for the expansion and to beat back the globalists who would like to close us down and shut us up. This is your chance to strike a blow for freedom this Christmas by going and doing all your shopping at the INFOWARS store. Check out the T-shirts, including the iconic Bill Clinton rape T-shirt. When these go, folks, they will not be any more. This T-shirt's going to end up in the Smithsonian, and you can find it now at the INFOWARS store. There's a few of them left, but check out the gear, check out the apparel, check out the books. This is what Alex Jones calls a 360 win. There it is, the Bill Clinton rape T-shirt that I designed and Alex Jones put on the historical political map.
All right, and we'll be right back. Final segment of Roger Stone coming up on the war. Final segment with Roger Stone. Now, coming up at the top of the next hour, we're going to play a clip from Zach, who's called in with lots of intelligence. He's going to talk about North Korea, how Obama was running guns, and also the corruption going on in Silicon Valley. We saw that Eric Schmidt resigned from Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, and QAnon, who is an intelligence operative, is suggesting that he resigned because Donald Trump signed an executive order going after the assets of people tied to trafficking of humans. So we're going to get to all that, but I want to start off with this clip and get your reaction from it, Roger. Of course, this is something we've been talking about, but we're seeing some heroes come out of the Republican leadership, one of which is Jim Jordan, who is really speaking about what's really going on, a guy who's really seems to be really pissed off about what's going on. Here he is talking to CNN, and I think this was today.
Have you had conversations, or has your office had conversations with the White House about the Mueller investigation?
I have not called we just had Mr. Sessions, Mr. Rosenstein, Mr. Wray in front of us. I did not talk to the White House about what kind of questions I was going to ask. I based it on the evidence and the facts that have come out. How do you get around the text message?
Have you had conversations with the White House, not about the questions you ask, but about the Mueller investigation in general?
Well, I've talked with the White House about all kinds of things. We've had talks with the White House about tax policy. We have talks about welfare policy. We've had talks about Obamacare. Of course, we've had talks with the White House. But my questions in those committees was driven by the evidence we've received in the last several weeks, like the text message from Peter Strzok and Lisa Page says, where we can't afford to take the risk that the American people are going to elect Donald Trump, so we need an insurance policy. If that doesn't go to intent to have a plan to disrupt the election, I want to talk about your argument here in a second, but I'm trying to get to the issue of coordination. You just said, of course, we talked to the White House.
John. Of course, we talked to the White House.
John, here's
about
the
Oh, yeah, you talked to the White House. That's bad now.
Are there talking points on the Mueller investigation?
No, there's reality, you dumbo.
The coordination. The Clinton campaign and the DNC, now we know those were one and the same, paid the law firm who paid Fusion GPS, who paid Christopher Steele, who paid Russians to give him this dossier, get this dossier that was, we think, taken to the FISA court and was the basis for securing warrants to spy on Americans.
The coordination between the Clinton campaign and Russians I will get to this. I will get to the dossier and the FBI.
But we got to go to break.
But I want to finish up on this issue of coordination.
Those are facts.
I want to get to the issue. I want to stay on the issue of coordination for 1 second.
I want to talk about the coordination we know. Here's the coordination we know.
Hang on. You've been on Fox News when you say that the FBI was, acting to keep Donald Trump from being president of the United States. Before you go on Fox News, do you talk to them?
The text messages say that.
Do you talk to them about these claims that you will make?
I talk to my colleagues, I look at the evidence, and I talk with our press people who book us on your show, and we talk about the coordination that exists between the Clinton campaign and the Russians. Now think about this. We know for a fact the Clinton campaign paid Russians to do what? To influence the election. And yet we've had this month-long investigation by Bob Mueller with no evidence that President Trump worked with Russians in any way to
Congressman, hang on.
But we know the Democrats did.
President Trump.
Wow, and people criticize Alex Jones for interrupting guests. This guy wouldn't let Jim Jordan get a word out about anything. Anytime he started to talk about an issue of substance, it was, what, were you coordinating with the White House on questions? The text messages speak for themselves, don't they, Roger?
Well, and they seem to think that Republican congressmen like Jim Jordan or Matt Gaetz or Ron DeSantis or Trey Gowdy, they need people to put words in their mouth. I mean, they're in the same party as the president. They're supporters of the president. There's nothing inappropriate about them talking to White House officials or even to the president himself. But they can read. They can look at the evidence. They don't need talking points to make their case. I went through this recently, as you know. I've been friendly with Congressman Matt Gaetz from North Florida since his days in the Florida state legislature. He invited me to a conference of doctors on the cannabis issue. And after the conference, there was a dinner. There were 14 people at the table in a public restaurant. Photos were taken, and I was proud to have my picture taken with him. That now pops up on Twitter as proof of a secret meeting in which Stone was programming Gaetz for his conversation with the president aboard Air Force One regarding the poisonous partisan nature of the Mueller investigation. Please, Matt Gaetz is his own man. He doesn't need Roger Stone to put words in his mouth. The secret meeting was in public, and there were 14 people present, and the discussion was about cannabis. I don't think the Mueller investigation ever came up. That's the thing about these liberals, Rob. They're all into these conspiracy theories, these nutty conspiracy theories. They're so obvious, like the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians to affect the election. There's a perfect example. Or Roger Stone coached Leanne Tweeden, the first accuser of Senator Al Franken, for weeks. There's another conspiracy theory that's completely false. I don't know what it is with these leftists and their crazy conspiracy theories. They really need to stick to facts, in my opinion.
Well, I know what it is. They can't come up with their own thoughts, their own original talking points, as you say. So they have to see what everybody else is saying. They're afraid to come up with an original thought. So they stick to the script. They get the script, and it's handed down from places like Media Matters. Look, here's an example. Let me show you the Media Matters headline. Come to this. This is from You Guys Shooting on December 19th. Alex Jones and Roger Stone visit a gun range to prepare for civil war if Trump is removed. Now, watch this as we go to the New York Daily News. Alex Jones, Roger Stone hit shooting range to prepare for civil war they say would break out if Trump is removed. Literally the same headline except for the words breakout. The same freaking headline. And we wonder, just watching them go to work. And that's why you had that CNN guy, that no-name, up there trying to stop Jim Jordan from talking. It's because he was coming out with, he's like, I'm not colluding with anybody. These are the facts. Oh, we don't want to talk about facts. There has to be collusion because we don't have anything. We read from script. Script has words on it, and we follow script. And there must be script somewhere. Where is your script, Mr. Jordan? And he's saying there is no script. We're looking at the text. We're looking at the evidence. We're forming our own questions. It's literal lunacy, but it just shows the mindset. That little bit of video right there just shows the liberal mindset. It's protect, 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 speak from the same script.
Well, just because they operate that way, they assume incorrectly that we operate that way. Jim Jordan is his own man. He doesn't need anybody at the White House to put words in his mouth or supply talking points. He is looking at the evidence. He is drawing his own conclusions. It's insulting, but it's understandable. You see, they think that we are like mindless liberal automatons that merely say what we're told to say. They're very good about staying on message, and the message during all of last year was essentially dictated by John Podesta. I mean, the brilliance of the Russian collusion thing, just as a political professional, I have to admire. What better way to distract from the fact that John and Tony Podesta and Bill and Hillary Clinton and their greedy, nasty little daughter, Chelsea, were reaping millions from the Russians? There's the bank deal, the uranium deal, the gas deal. No, they're absolutely right. There was a major party presidential candidate in bed with Putin. Unfortunately, it wasn't Donald Trump. It was Hillary Rotten Clinton.
Yep, you hit the nail on the head, and that is why, and that's frankly why we're winning, because straight talking Trump, whether he's right 100% of the time or not, it doesn't matter. The fact that he was sit there and talk to the American people like adults, kind of having a beer with them almost when you go to these events and speeches. And you have Hillary Clinton, who has everything pre-programmed, calculated. You know, somebody came up with the term deplorables, and she was just waiting for the time to use it, and it all backfired on them because these aren't real people. They're living in a dream world where, you know, Twitter and Google and Facebook are the arbiters of what is right and what you can say and what you can't, and that has backfired on them. And it doesn't matter if they kick everybody off Twitter like you've been kicked off. People are just going to go somewhere else, and then pretty soon there's just going to be a bunch of automatons on Twitter that are all regurgitating the same talking point, and it's going to outlive its usefulness.
I couldn't agree more. Look, next year, I will launch my multiple lawsuits against Twitter in an effort to take them down. In the meantime, I have concluded that my ban on Twitter was just probably 60 days ahead of everybody else on the right. There's a giant gag coming across the board for the voices of freedom or the Trump supporters or anyone who is right of center.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Hey, Roger Stone, thanks for joining us. We'll see you after Christmas. That's it. Welcome. You're watching The War Room. This is Rob Dew reporting for INFOWARS.com. INFOWARS.com/show is the free stream.